but are two of the most anxious men on the circuit. At 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, Whitehead brings in the first British car to win at Le Mans for 16 years.
While he'd been out of luck in '51, a year earlier, a day before his 19th birthday, Stirling Moss began his association with Jaguar, driving a privately entered car to victory in the British Tourist Trophy. The Jaguar factory had had its eye on the teenager for some time, but felt he was going too quickly for one so young, and they didn't want him to kill himself in one of their vehicles. The 1950 TT changed their minds, and he was signed that night, beginning a very fruitful association that wasn't without its hair-raising moments.
I raced the first disc brake car in the world in 1952, which was a Jaguar C-Type. But we went through an enormous amount of development for that, which has made the brake now the greatest and safest brake in the world. And I can tell you it didn't come easily. I mean, we'd go into a corner and put my foot on the brake, fantastic. Go into the next corner, and because of things like vaporization and so on, put your foot down, there's no brakes at all. And they had to develop those things out, knock off, and all sorts of technical things that ultimately had to be developed out of the problems, out of the bugs out of it. And then we finished up with a really good brake, which of course now just about every car in the world has disc brakes.
Well, because your life was on the line in that sort of testing, you must have developed a great trust for the designers and the people that were throwing these new gadgets onto the machines for you.
Well, it's because I like gadgets, I think, but I can tell you I have been into things backwards. I've spun a car many times. I've been down the escape road in and out of the straw bales and so on. I think I've had in my lifetime 8 complete brake failures, which is a fairly serious thing. I mean, you put your foot on the brakes and there's nothing there. I can tell you, it really, as they say in Italian, it makes you very nervous. And
do you really see the life that you've led flashing in front of you?
I didn't have the time for that, boy. All I can tell you is I did everything I could to try to put the car sideways and get the speed down, going through the gearbox and that sort of thing. Really, what you're thinking of more than anything is self-preservation. Maybe the next chapter is in everything coming from your life before you. I didn't reach that one.
This Sandown circuit really has the Mercedes-Benz team foxed this afternoon. After getting everything right this morning, the circuit has now started to deteriorate badly, and they've had to come into the pits. This is the Balde Johansson car. They've come into the pits not to soften up their springs as they did this morning, but now to stiffen them up again, because the car is being pitched too much on the track. As you've seen, the lead car of Schlesser has already spun once, foxed by the conditions.
Exception. They've dominated it this year. They've dominated it over the last 4 years of racing. And it really has been an incredible performance for a 48-year-old driver who'll move up into the C1 category later. They've had a best this year of 4th and 5th placings outright. Nobody has qualified better than 7th on the grid in a C2 car up until today. And they look like qualifying 5th fastest. And Joe Saywood, it really is a remarkable team for the performance of the drivers, the consistency and their competitiveness against quite a lot of other teams from other countries.
The most professional of all the teams in C2, and the statistics really speak for themselves. Gordon Spice, world champion 4 consecutive years running, and I'd have to go back, delve into the books to find out if anyone can match that record. But Gordon's had a long career. He's been a saloon car driver in Europe. He's won the Spa 24 Hours, which is the big touring car event. He's been all kinds of different cars champion. He raced at Le Mans with Larry Perkins, indeed, in a Porsche Carrera a few years ago too.
And in fact, his Le Mans performances are quite remarkable too, aren't they?
Yes, he was 3rd overall in, I think it was...
Any engine. Their only requirement is that they must not weigh less than 700 kilos, whereas C1 car must not weigh less than 850, so they're 150 kilos lighter, or can be that much lighter. And then they must use less fuel, which in the case of a 360-kilometre race at Sandown is 130 litres, where the C1s can use almost 50% more, 190 litres. And other than that, they can use whatever engine they like as long as they get through on no more than 130 litres of fuel. And in the case of the Spice cars, it's that remarkably successful and durable engine, the Cosworth V8 that was a Formula 1 engine, now is a 3.3 litre, more lowly stressed Cosworth in the days of Alan Jones probably had up to about 550 horsepower. These ones, if they rev them right up to 9,000 revs, probably in the area of about 470, 460, something like that.
Jaguar has brought with it the most amazing timing system, probably better than that which the organisers have. Eric Cowsall, what does it do?
Basically, it's I'm logging the process of all the cars that pass. I'm using an infrared beam across the track. Obviously, I'm working as I'm talking to you, so I have to just keep my eye on the track as well. But I'm logging the progress of every car on the track. They break a light beam, it puts a time into the computer, and then I dedicate what that time represents.
This is the first time that Australia has had a light beam used. Has it worried the organisers?
They came down the first day and had a good look at it, and I think they were a little bit worried, but their time's pretty good, so I've got no worries.
Eric, across the readout, what are we seeing?
Basically, we're seeing that the first two places are taken by the Mercedes. They were quickest this morning. The morning session is usually the quickest, and then we've got the two Jaguars third and fourth fastest. And this afternoon, I think we've put up the faster times. Jan Lammers actually put up the fastest time overall this afternoon, a 1:33.1, and Schlesser second fastest, 1:33.4 in the number one Mercedes.
What are the cars doing this afternoon if not going for the world's fastest time?
No, they're basically going for a race setup. They've been converted to the race specification over the lunch break, and they're going for fuel economy runs to test the fuel economy, because obviously, as you know, it's a fuel efficient race. So they go out, do 5 or 6 laps, come back in, see how much fuel's been used, etc. And generally setting things up for the race.
Well, according to Jaguar's timing this afternoon then, the fastest time set this afternoon, a 1:33.48 for Schlesser and Mass, 1:36.12 for Baldi and Johansson, the two Mercedes-Benz. Then come the Jaguars on 1:34.6 for Eddie Cheever and 1:33.10 for Jan Lammers.
And Porsche, represented by the form of the 962. The big difference in that car is that it's a car you can buy. Customers can't go out and buy a Sauber Mercedes or an XJR9 Jaguar, but they can get a Porsche 962.
Yes, these have been the cars that have been the backbone of Group C racing for the last 5 years. And it's a shame, really, this year the factory cars that raced only at Le Mans have not been able to take on the Jaguars and Mercedes, because at Le Mans, 24 hours of racing. It was the Works Porsches versus the Works Jaguars. The Mercedes actually pulled out because of a tyre problem in practice, but it was one of the greatest Le Mans races this year. And being there at the end of it all was a very emotional experience.
For the English, and there were lots of them. This is the Tim Lee Davey, Neil Krang Porsche 962. They in fact have built 44 of these. They will be building another 6. In fact, Jürgen Barth is here and saying that next year,
competitively in Group C, it seems that Porsche is looking to Indianapolis more importantly.
A flat 6 German engine just gone out of view in car number 20. It's 2.8 litres in the Porsche. This is 5 litres. Both of them have 2 turbochargers. This is a V8, and this is Jean-Louis Schlesser, the man who, when you last saw him in a Grand Prix, was going through a chicane at Monza and being overtaken by Ayrton Senna. And it was that clash of the Williams car being driven by Jean-Louis Schlesser and Ayrton Senna and the Marlboro McLaren that made an imperfect season for the almost all-conquering Marlboro McLaren Hondas. But this man, and in terms of qualifying, Joe Saywood, has been just as impressive this season.
Yes, this season Jean-Louis in the 10 races so far has been on pole 5.
Live in Monte Carlo.
Ah, all right. He lives close to the border of Monte Carlo in France.
On a boat mainly.
On a boat mainly, yes. And he was in the jewellery business in Paris for quite a long time, and he loves to relate the story of the Formula 3 Championship of France way back in the mid-70s, when he was equal in the championship at the end of it with Alain Prost. No wonder he likes to relate the story.
Yes, indeed. Well, of course, he was leading this championship. Non-turbocharged, but they won at Le Mans. They've won the championship not only this year, but last year. Martin Brundle this year, Raoul Vassell last year, and they are a formidable combination. In fact, last year, when they won the championship, my comment, and I think that of a number of other people, was you've upset Porsche. And that's a disastrous thing to do, because when they get angry and they get serious, they make life very hard. And what happened was that Jaguar went on to a further success.
The interesting thing about car number 2, of course, is that you have on board 2 Le Mans winners. And here's one of them, Jan Lammers, little Dutchman, very little Dutchman. You wander around, you had to sort of look down to see Jan.
If they cranked up an adjacent windmill reasonably fast, he'd blow away.
Absolutely. But he's a very, very fine driver, and he had a rather unfortunate time in Grand Prix racing. There are many people who believe that he should still be there to this day, but it didn't work out. He never had any money. Holland is a very small country, and there's not enough money about to keep somebody in Formula One. And the Dutchman has made his money and his reputation in recent years as a sports car driver, and look at that.
And that is what we might call temporary, Cam. That's down in the nose of that Jaguar. That's car 107 that's just gone by him, the second of the Chamberlain engineering cars, the Jean-Louis Ricci, Claude Ballolina car. And this is right down on the air intake in the nose of the XJR9 Jaguar number 2.
Price, an Englishman working for the German team, who was the referee in the football game. And he used to run a Formula 3 team, and Johnny Dumfries was a British Formula 3 champion run by Dave Price.
The thing about qualifying at the moment, with those times done this morning, at 1:28.62 by Jean-Louis Schlesser, Jochen Maas in the Sauber Mercedes number 61, the 1:29.98 done by Mauro Baldi and Stefan Johansson in number 62, then the Silk Cut Jaguar of Marcus Brundle and Eddie Cheever number 1, 1:30.95, and then number 2, 1:32.45 for Jan Lammers and Johnny Dumfries, is that really they're only racing against each other. There are none of the really hot Porsches that are likely to try and force their pace. There are no other cars that can produce the sort of power and performance that these can. So for the 2 Saubers to try and go any faster, they're only racing against each other. For the 2 Jaguars to try and go any faster, they can't catch the Saubers, and they would only be racing against each other. And really, it's an unnecessary risk in conditions that generally later in the day are more difficult for better times to be posted. So this is what happened this morning. This is the situation that there's the invitation there for them to better. The 2 Sauber Mercedes in 1st and 2nd position at the moment, the 2 Jaguars in 3rd and 4th. Then the Gordon Spice car, Ray Bellum car, number 111, Calder Spice, racing in C2. The Lee Davey, Neil Krang, Porsche 962. Then the Chamberlain engineering car, 107, Jean-Louis Ricci, the Perfume family man, and the Claude Ballolina. He, in fact, the oldest driver in the field, Joe Saywood. With, sorry, the second of the Spice cars, 8th fastest, number 103, and then Costas Loss and De Hemming 9th at the moment.
And here we are back with the 2 Sauber Mercedes lapping together now. They're probably doing some kind of comparison test to see how it's getting on.
I think a thing that they'd be very interested in at the moment is getting a final read on fuel consumption at something approaching full load and realistic race time laps tomorrow, which is the sort of lap times they've been doing earlier, 33s, 34s.
Yeah, if you look very closely at the cars, you'll see that they have quite a different setup, because the one behind is bumping around much more than the one in front, which has got a nice steady ride to it. And if you look very closely, you'll see that kind of jumping up and down, which will be disconcerting for the number 61, Jean-Louis Schlesser, Jochen Mass. They'll want to have a nice ride with their car. But bumping or not, they seem to be going all right.
Yes, they do indeed.
That was overtaking the Mauro Baldi Stefan Johansson car, which we haven't talked very much about, actually. Stefan Johansson, of course, is a present Formula 1 driver with Ligier. He's had an awful year with Ligier. The sports cars have made up for some of the disappointments he's had in Grand Prix racing, but he's been with Ferrari in the past, and indeed with McLaren. and he hopes that next year he'll be with another team. He won't.
Formula One engines in the field. We have the Cosworth V8. We have the Hart 4-cylinder turbo taken out to nearly 2 litres, and we have also the BMW 1.5 litre turbo that's been taken out to 2 litres also.
And the heat is what's really affecting the cars down here. Behind me is the Costas Lost car. Now, that's been in the pits for quite some time. The team is in no hurry to get back out because the thing came in spewing water. It's overheating, and all they want to do at the moment is just quietly do their fuel consumption work. And that's the way it goes, all down the C2 pits. There are Italians and French lying exhausted all down pit row as their cars have been pushed out of the hot Australian sun. As far as the Australians go, well, they've got their problems too. Dick Johnson is fighting terminal understeer. He says he has to drive it like a speed car. Just rush into the corner, put on the brakes and get full lock oversteer on the way out under power just to get it through a corner. Andrew Medicki is in the pits. His Chamberlain Hart is having an engine replace after this morning when the engine lost power and there was nothing to do but to change the thing. And John Smith, well, he had a frightening moment on the course just a little while ago when the wing flew off the back of his ADA car and left him without any downforce at all.
Thank you, John. Well, we can wind the clock back 60 years now to the first golden era of sports car racing, back in fact to when it all began. In this story, you'll see and hear several interesting links to present-day racing, such as why these modern sports cars still carry 2 seats. And you'll no doubt recognize the name of one of the mechanics who used to occupy that extra seat. So let's race back to the 1920s to remember how it all began, when the drivers literally had to raise the roof to get things going.
The Germans are in Sicily with a team of supercharged Mercedes. They are returning to racing with Dr. Ferdinand Porsche as chief engineer. They are up against several works teams and a vast private Hispano-Suiza. Races can be lost and won by pit work. One of the Mercedes team today is a man called Neubauer, who is hoping to make his name as a racing driver. He will do no better than 15th in this race, but he will become the most famous team manager in the world. The race is won by Werner on a Mercedes, but the Germans are not invited to the French Grand Prix. Until now, there has been little spectacle in sports car racing. A limit on fuel consumption tended to cut down speed. Although it was all taken very seriously, with technical experts to help and plenty of skilled supervision. Every part of the cars got the same rigorous testing. It's the racing that just hasn't the real Grand Prix atmosphere. That is until a sports car race at Le Mans, the 24-hour Grand Prix d'Endurance, captures everyone's imagination. This is real motor racing with cars that can be used for family outings. Even the hoods must be put up for the opening laps. It's a major international event with British Bentleys and French Lorraine Dietrichs competing for high honours. Lorraine Dietrichs come in first, second and third, giving an overwhelming victory to France. The works Bentleys for the Brooklands Double 12 are fitted with spring clips. They are said to make the hood fixing particularly rapid. This is the longest race ever held in Britain, a handicap for all sizes with 2 days of hard racing, the cars being locked up overnight. The Bentleys are fastest, but a smaller Alfa Romeo just leads on handicap, Ramponi taking the major award for Italy. None who saw them, however, will forget the great Bentleys thundering through the field. Le Mans sees the same green cars carrying British prestige to new heights. There are 6 American cars this year, 3 Stutz, 2 Chryslers and a DuPont. It is a complete British victory with Bentley's first, second, third and fourth. Bonato is partnered by Tim Birkin. Ireland starts her own Grand Prix and makes it a sports car race. It's a hot day and the newly tarred corners add to the fun. The Bentleys are again fastest, but Glenn Kidston, when in the lead, loses valuable seconds and damages a wheel. Again, it's an Alfa Romeo that takes the major award on handicap. In this golden age of sports car racing, the Tourist Trophy is revived and has everything. Fords are drawn up next to the Works Bugattis, and was there ever a start quite like this? W.O. Bentley himself went along as riding mechanic to Tim Birkin. I took on the job, he recalls, because I thought our mechanics were beginning to consider themselves heroes. After the race, I realized they were right. On top of everything, it rains. And once again, everyone goes slower, except a man called Caracciolo. A second Mercedes is driven by Otto Mertz. The veteran giant rips off a damaged wing. An observer takes the note, and he is disqualified. So Rudy Caracciolo comes through to win the TT and emerges as one of the stars of the future.
For many years, sports car racing, from 360-kilometre sprints to the 24-hour grind at Le Mans, has been dominated by Porsche. But in the last couple of years, there's been some new challenges that have almost vanquished the German sports car marque. The first of them was the Jaguar V12. The other is the Sauber Mercedes, run by Peter Sauber from Switzerland and with a lot of help from Daimler-Benz in Germany. This car has a much shorter wheelbase, something around 10 or 12 centimetres than the Jaguar, which it's been competing against so strongly this year. At the back end, the differential and the gearbox have to do a tremendous amount of work because they have to tolerate the enormous forces being pushed out by the V8 engine up front. Based on that production V8, but then with electronic fuel injection and with a turbocharger either side, about 800 horsepower on maximum boost, up to 1.2 bar in qualifying, but perhaps around 650 horsepower in race trim, makes it the fastest accelerating of all these endurance sports cars. The front of the Jaguar XJR9 is made for cutting through the air at up to 400 kilometres an hour. The whole shape of the body is made for absolute fuel efficiency at speeds like that, because fuel efficiency is just as important in these cars as road holding and handling. And for instance, this covered-in rear wheel arch, unique to the Jaguar, is all part of better airflow over the whole motor car. And up forward here is the most critical part of the car. As the air flows over the cabin into this ducting here, into the vital part of the car, the unique part of the car, the 7-litre V12 engine. Lucas fuel injection and just a gigantic engine pushing out an enormous amount of power and torque, although it really only is usable over about a 2,000 rev band. It comes in at around 4,500 revs. By 6,500 revs, it's pumping out about 720 horsepower. Around at the rear end of the car, very important aspect of the design, the negative pressure area, that opening area underneath the car that pulls the car down, particularly the faster it goes, onto the track, giving it grip that in corners is about 2.5 times the force of gravity, and under brakes up to 3 times the force of gravity. The Porsche 962, as you can see, the main body section there, then, like all Porsches, the engine unbolts immediately behind that, the flat 6-cylinder engine to the drive line and the rear suspension here in one unit, and then the whole under tray that helps with the downforce effect that gives the car extra pressure down on the ground and helps their cornering. There's not a lot of visual difference between an outright C1 class car and the lesser class, the C2 class cars. The two main differences are that the C2 cars are allowed to be 100 kilos lighter, 750 kilograms minimum weight, where the C1s must be 850 kilos, but they must also use less fuel. For this race, these cars are only allowed to use 130 litres, where the C1s can use up to 190 litres. The Spice team have won every race but one this year. They've been the outright contenders in the C2 class for many years, and this year they've had 4th and 5th places and have split the Jaguars in qualifying, and they feel at this circuit they could even end up on the rostrum in one of the major placings. The preferred engine for a C2 car is the Cosworth V8. Started originally in 1967 as a Formula 1 engine and 3 litres. Nowadays most of them are around 3.3 litres, normally aspirated, so no turbocharger. They can push out 520 horsepower out of this 4 valves per cylinder V8 when they rev them up to 9,000 revs, but then if that's going to use too much fuel, they must come back in revs perhaps to as low as 8,000, and that reduces power to around 460, 470 horsepower.
Thank you, Will. Interesting highlight there of the vast technological improvements in motor racing over the last 6 decades. Well, we're going to come right back to the present now. In just a second, we'll be joining John Smales with 2 distinguished guests down in the pits to explain the driving techniques required to handle these immensely powerful and extraordinarily fast motor cars. So down in the pits with John, here are Larry Perkins and Martin Brundle.
And while Larry Perkins is doing it easily, Martin Brundle's been the man who's been sweating it today. It's really hot out there, Martin.
Yeah, the ambient temperature's coming right up. Somebody said it's going to rain tomorrow. Somebody else said it's going to be very hot. We'll wait and see.
This is Australia. Welcome to it. But the temperature inside the cockpit, Martin, is just incredible.
Yeah, it gets very warm. We're sitting inside a carbon fibre tub. The slope of the back of our seat is our fuel tank. That runs about 50 degrees centigrade. We've got a V12 breathing down our neck. That's sort of obviously up in the 100, 110 degrees centigrade. And on each corner of carbon fibre brakes, they run at about 400 degrees centigrade. And the radiator's just at our feet. So we're right in the centre of a heat sink.
Do you use the cool suits?
No, I have to get a bit hotter than this. It's the humidity that gets you rather than the heat, funnily enough.
What's the technique of driving these big cats?
Well, they are big cars. They're 850 kilos. They've got 700 plus horsepower. Pay the price 10 laps later.
So what's the technique tomorrow in a 360-kilometre race?
Flat out, see what the weather's like. Fuel is the main criteria here, fuel efficiency.
Well, Larry Perkins has been watching what the guys have been doing with fuel efficiency this afternoon, Larry. What have the times been like?
Well, they've got the Group C1 cars have got to pay attention to the fuel, from what I can gather. You can't run absolutely flat out on the power they'd like to. Both the Mercedes and the Jag are in the same boat. They've got the C2 cars breathing down the neck where they have to make a much shorter pit stop and only take on 30 litres of fuel, where the front car's got to take on 90 or 95 litres of fuel. So it'll be a race of tactics, and from what I hear, they can't drive the cars absolutely flat out on the brakes as well. They've got to pay attention to those things, and be a race of tactics, even though it's a sprint race.
And yet, Larry, while the cars are in race trim this afternoon, Jan Lammers has put up a sensational time.
Yes, Jan has moved himself to 3rd on the grid, just a couple of hundredths ahead of her teammate Martin here. And a time of 1 minute 30, which is slightly behind the Jag that's on pole, which is 1.3 seconds further ahead. But don't forget, their time's on qualifiers and no petrol. He sneaked it in on the track this afternoon, which is indeed a bit slower. But the race pace appears to be 1 minute 34, 1 minute 33, and that's what's going to be the real tell. And I don't know whether the heat's going to get to the drivers of the cars first, but I think they'll both really tell signs of it after.
Gentlemen, thanks very much. The thing that's really amazed me this afternoon in practice is suddenly all the containers at the back of the workshops have opened up and a whole heap of new bits have come out of them. It's amazing just how much equipment has been brought to this circuit, especially by the machinery that's come from the Mercedes-Benz factory in Stuttgart.
This is the equipment, 7 tons of it, and the effort necessary to compete in world endurance sports car racing. The races vary from the 360 kilometres of the Lucas Supersprint at Sandown to the 24-hour, 5,000 kilometre grind at Le Mans. the Sauber Mercedes are phenomenally powerful and fast cars. Nice virtues, but a potential problem for the components that have to take the thrashing and do the work. One of the men involved with making them work is Australian Wayne Greedy from Moree in northern New South Wales. Wayne, it's a long way from servicing tractors in Moree to running a race team out of Switzerland. How did that happen?
Well, yes, it is a little bit, but it's over a few years I decided to advance my career, and I ended up going to England for a holiday, and here I am. But running the race team I don't do, I'm just one of the boys.
And how long have you been with Sauber Mercedes?
I began working with them early this season, and I suppose it's about 3 or 4 months now.
And what part has Mercedes-Benz in Germany played in the running of this team?
Well, mostly in the engine development. Of course, there is some factory backing on the car itself, but we do get a lot of support from the factory, yes.
These are the fastest racing cars in the world. At fast circuits like Le Mans, they hit nearly 400 kilometres an hour every lap. So it's vital that drivers are comfortable. This is their home, their office, for up to 24 hours in stints of 1 hour per driver. And their cars made for use in any conditions, rain, fog, and at night. They put out similar power to a Formula One car, but much more torque, so they have to be tough, rugged, and functional. Easy to service and repair during a race, if necessary. The Lucas Supersprint should be run at a hectic pace, a battle between the more nimble Jaguars and these Mercedes, the fastest accelerating cars of them all.
And joining me in our little studio setup now is international motoring writer and commentator Bob Costanduros, who follows the sports car circuit around the world. Bob, thanks for joining us. What are your impressions on Sandown 88 so far, good and bad?
Well, in comparison to Sandown 84, it's got to be much better already. I remember that year there was so much, the track was breaking up, they had a lot of problems. This year it's a smaller field, but I think we're going to have a fantastic head-to-head battle between Jaguar and Mercedes, and that has got to be good news. It's going to be tremendous. The track isn't breaking up. Okay, they've had to do 1 or 2 alterations. The weather's good, which is a great boost. Everybody, I mean, having come all the way from Europe, not me, but many of the teams having come all the way from Europe, to come to a cold 20 degrees as it was meant to be, and to turn out now at 27 or 28 degrees has got to be good news.
Now, what's the future for Sandown? Is this a one-off event, or will sports car racing be coming here for the foreseeable future?
Well, the new rules that are coming up quite soon make it essential that the championship can't visit one country more than once, which basically gives the opportunity for 11 countries to host championship events. And I'm sure everybody here today hopes that we can come back here in the future, because although it's a tight and short circuit, just as Jean-Louis Schlesser says, you can't have great long circuits everywhere. We've got one at Spa. Why can't we have a much shorter one, tighter one? So hopefully, yes, we can come back here again, but we'll certainly be coming back to Australia, I'm certain of that.
That's good. Now, sports car racing is enjoying a resurgence at the moment in the late 1980s. Can it go on, do you think, to rival Formula One in popularity if it's handled properly?
I think that's difficult at this stage. We've got the personalities in Formula One. We've got the Ayrton Sennas, the Alain Prosts, the Nelson Piquets, world champions, and Formula One is the highest formula, the echelon, the peak of world motor racing, and it will remain that, I think. And it's going to be jolly difficult, frankly, to get sports car racing up to that peak. But having said that, it can run a very, very close second, because you can have as many world manufacturers involved in the championship, different chassis, different engines, many different drivers. I think it can be a superb series. I really do, and I think it will be.
Will we see in the future a more evenly balanced competition? I mean, early in the 80s, Porsche dominated, and now it's Jaguar and Mercedes. Will we see the factory teams, more and more of them coming in and more of them competitive?
Well, already next week, I am told that Peugeot will announce their future plans, and we expect Nissan and Toyota to come into the championship in the near future. Well, they're already involved, and they will be more involved in the future. I think Porsche will still remain in there with an engine. We'll have Jaguar, we'll have Mercedes. I really do think
it's going to enjoy a tremendous resurgence, and we're going to see many, many teams battling it out on equal basis here at Sandown in the future.
I must ask you a question I ask many people in this situation. Is this a sport or a travelling technological circus?
I'll cover myself, both. No, I think it is. Technology obviously enters into it enormously, and the world's manufacturers are gaining from that technology. Jaguar are gaining from it, Mercedes are gaining from it, but at the same time it is a sport. And those are sportsmen out there. They have to train like sportsmen. They may have to be businessmen as well, but they also have to train like sportsmen.
Well, I'll ask you finally, I was interviewing Stirling Moss in Adelaide a year ago, and he was bemoaning the fact that in Formula One these days there are very few characters. All the drivers are technocrats and businessmen, but I noticed from the press conference today that we've got a few characters here in sports car racing. That must be good.
Oh, it is. It's excellent. They're tremendous people, but you see, some of them are in Formula One as well. Stefan Johansson's in Formula One, Eddie Cheever's in Formula One. But this is a more relaxed setting. Here they're under less pressure, and I think that makes a big difference to them. Because they're under less pressure, because we haven't got one practice session or qualifying session after another, debriefs, trying to sort out the car, trying to even get on the grid in Formula One's case, they're much more relaxed here than they would be in Formula One, in Grand Prix racing.
Okay, Bob, thank you very much for your time. And just before we go back to the last few minutes of practice, a couple of reminders coming up shortly on ABC television. Live coverage of the women's or the girls' final of the World Youth Cup Tennis in Perth. And tonight at 12:20 Eastern Standard Time on ABC TV, live coverage of the second rugby union test between the Wallabies and Scotland from Murrayfield. So more top sport coming up on ABC TV, but right now, let's go back and check the lap times and grid positions with your commentary team.
And, dear oh me, what a moment to come back. One of the Jaguars skating off into a sand trap. And it's car number 2. That's the car that's been...
Johnny Dumfries and Jan Lammers.
Yeah, third fastest so far, a 30.2. And we said earlier, Joe, or I was saying, that they're only practicing and qualifying against themselves and there's no point to it. And does that prove what we were saying?
Yes. Yes, he's obviously, I think he's just lost control at the end of the main straight, probably under braking, has gone off there. Doesn't appear to be too badly damaged, but that car had improved in the last 10 minutes or so, and so maybe they were just pushing a bit too hard and have gone off, but that's not the sort of thing you want to do on the day before the race.
Perhaps a little bit tempted by the time of the Sauber Mercedes Mauro Baldi and Stefan Johansson, number 62, which was looking rather interesting at just a quarter of a second faster, 1:29.98, compared with the 1:30.2 that car had done. The sand did a good job, touched the left front, and Joe, they would of course have plenty of spare parts in terms of front ends of the car, suspension bits and so on.
Oh yes, there'll be plenty of spare parts there for them, but it means for the mechanics who've got a busy day ahead of them tomorrow, they'll be there. When a car goes into a sand trap, the amount of sand that gets into it is absolutely unbelievable. Yes. They get pounds and pounds and pounds, and that's Johnny Dumfries just climbing out. And that's been an unfortunate thing this year. He's fallen off quite a few times actually in the course of the year.
Yes, this is Bob Costanduros back again with you. What a shame for Johnny, because that was a bit of an embarrassment to go off. He has had one or two embarrassing moments, and he'll be frustrated with that, very frustrated indeed. As he walks away from that car, you can see it well up into the kitty litter, as it's called, and that has done its job ideally.
The man in the crashed car is Johnny Dumfries, and Larry Perkins, that's not necessarily surprising.
I don't know about that, but the car just came in and they put new qualifiers on it, and sat here for a little bit, and I don't know why he's gone off the end of the circuit, but it could be a combination of cold tyres or if you sit here for a bit, you get heat soak into the brakes, and when you arrive at the first corner, the pedal is a little bit spongy, and he may have misread the situation, and anyway, it's been a slight error where he's gone off. But the sand traps worked very well and slowed the car down. It's tremendous speed it reaches here, and I don't think there's any damage.
Larry, they've been trying a new braking system. What is it, and is it possible that caused the problem?
Well, they're running carbon fibre brakes, which have been around for some time now. I don't think I would say at this stage that they caused the problem. carbon fibre or cast iron brakes. When you sit for a bit, they had heat soaks into them and you get a spongy pedal, and it may have contributed, but may have also been the fact there's only a few minutes of practice left, and he was a bit hyped up, so time will tell.
I asked you the question about Dumfries purposely, of course, because Dumfries is the man who's got the reputation as someone who finds it a bit hard to stay on the island.
Well, I haven't been following his reputation as that, but I thought he did a good job at Le Mans there earlier this year when I was there, and so I won't rush in and say that indeed it was his fault. It may have been a combination of factors, but the main thing is the car's not damaged and he's okay, and he'll certainly be going all right for tomorrow.
Some of the non-damaged bits being carted back to the pits and put into the car, and there's its sister team car, number 1, the car that was disposed or displaced from 4th place, 3rd grid position back to 4th. But have a look, if we can get in tightly enough, at, is it the left-hand door?
Yes, the left-hand door seems to be slightly open, which is not what you really want going around Sandown.
Coming up to the point where the team car ran off. Silk Cut Jaguar number 1, Martin Brundle, Eddie Cheever.
Yes, it's just flapping about a little bit. It doesn't appear to be too serious a problem, but there's a little bit of movement there that shouldn't be there.
Larry Perkins saying no damage done, and he's saying that from a fair distance away from that car. But as you were saying, Joe Saywood, it could conceivably have got grit and or stones into the engine intakes even, certainly into brakes, and there'd be some minor body damage, I'd think. Oh yes, there's the door there floating open.
Yes, the thing about going into a sand trap is that it may not have done any damage, but you have to find out. And that takes a long time to go through. The mechanics will be up, checking everything out to make sure there are no stones where there should not be stones.
About 4 minutes remaining in this practice session is becoming quite tense. That incident for 3rd grid position car number 2, this 4th grid position car number 1, going for a better time, trying to catch the 1:30.2 that's been done by their teammate. They're presently sitting on a 1:30.95. And they have 1 second faster that enticing view of car number 62, the Sauber Mercedes of Mauro Baldi and Stefan Johansson. And if this Jaguar can cut a second off its best time, it comes up onto the front row of the grid.
Yes, at the moment it's only doing 1:34, so they may not be, well, you wouldn't want to go for a time with your door open either.
Looked as though it's working the car very hard there, and I suspect what they're doing is more or less a race setup, fairly hard on a race pace situation with fairly full tanks and tyres and so on. Cylinder engine, now punch transmission that really has to absorb enormous loads, and this is the situation that's come out of the 2 1.5-hour practice sessions on a very warm day down at Sandown for the 11th and final round of the World Championship for prototype sports cars. We see the 2 Sauber Mercedes holding the front row of the grid, Schlesser and Maas, Baldi and Johansson. With those times, remember that the fastest qualifying here in 1984 was done by Stefan Beloff at a 1:31.6. Then it's Jan Lammers and Johnny Dumfries, the car that's off in the kitty litter at the moment, Martin Brundle, Eddie Cheever to be beside them, 3/4 of a second slower. Then the C2 car of Gordon Spice and Ray Bellham, Lee Davey and Neil Krang, the Australian, in car number 20, Ricci and Ballo Lena in another of the C2 cars, and then up into the top 8, the Australian Veskander of Bow and Dick Johnson.
What should be another mighty battle tomorrow between those mighty Mercedes and juiced up Jaguars, with of course the Porsches in there, our own Dick Johnson and John Bowie to stir the pot. Just a reminder, you can catch all the action live here from Sandown tomorrow afternoon from 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time That's in major capital cities around Australia. And as Bob Costanduros was saying, on the evidence so far, this is certainly going to be an event that's going to supersede what happened in 1984, and hopefully it spells big things for the future of sports car racing here in Australia. I'll just remind you that the rugby is coming up tonight at 12:20 Eastern Standard Time from Murrayfield, Wallabies versus Scotland. Hope you can join us from that. But right now, if our technology is up to date, as I say, good afternoon from here on behalf of Will Haig and John Smales and the team, we should be able to take you right across Australia to Perth.